Well, for one final time in 2023, we're going to be taking a look at Doctor Who's 60th anniversary celebrations over at Big Finish, in Once and Future, Episode 7, entitled The Union, as written by Matt Fitton. And of course, you all know the drill by now. This release is available to order now on the Big Finish website on both physical CD and digital download. The standard edition can be purchased as a part of a bundle alongside the other releases within this series. And many months ago, on the announcement of this series, there was also a limited edition bundle featuring exclusive cover art, extended behind the scenes, and of course an extended booklet. This has now long sold out and was a limited edition to 3,000 units. So this series has been a rather unusual journey, blending both classic series Doctor Who and new series Doctor Who, with the occasional Big Finish exclusive character in there as well. I was rather uncertain as to how this series was going to end, as the stories have been enjoyable so far and have definitely celebrated many different eras within Doctor Who's history. However, it wasn't quite the big grand story that I was expecting, instead opting for smaller scale stories with small threads that connect all of the episodes together. But this time with the Union, we have a story where the plot arc itself comes to the forefront, as you would expect for a series finale. It is in fact quite the coincidence that within my previous review of Once and Future, I discussed the reliance that this series has perhaps had to the TV show itself, rather than relying on Big Finish creations. The final two stories in this series' defence has started to twist that round, and I do think that it's a shame that those elements weren't brought in a lot earlier into this series, as on both occasions, in my opinion, they have reflected the stronger elements of Once and Future overall, seeing Big Finish take their own characters and do something big with them. The Doctor receives a distress call from Susan as she is trapped in the Diamond Array, the location of the infamous Union of which the Doctor must locate on his mission to solve the degeneration problem. Of course, at this point within the series, the Doctor has received a series of clues as well as various components which have allowed him to get to this point within the series to locate the Union in the first place. And it is here, of course, that the Doctor comes face to face with the Union itself, and the story comes rather full circle. So it addresses the plot arc of the series, featuring callbacks, many cameos. I think it's a satisfying, well-rounded conclusion. Although from a plot perspective, I don't think that this story has a large amount of loose ends to tie up, unlike other series that Big Finish have created, where that final story has lots of things to do and lots of threads to tie together. I think that is entirely down to the plot arc of this series and how it has been presented over the previous parts, something of which that I have been a little bit iffy on, as most of the stories have featured very loose threads which tie all of the episodes together, meaning each episode stands out in its own right as something different, but then it is quite hard overall to kind of feel like the series is going in a particular direction. Maureen O'Brien absolutely steals the show within this story. Of course, she played Vicky within the 1960s First Doctor era of the show, but within this story, she plays the Union. Maureen does a utterly superb job of playing the baddie. Her tone, her presence, her retaliation to the Doctor's heroics, no matter who is in the hot seat, really shines through. I do think that it is really fitting having Paul McGann as a central Doctor for this release, linking back to the Time War references within episode 1 of Once and Future. I think it's also very fitting as in some ways McGann's Doctor is Big Finish's flagship Doctor, expanding his era from being very little, essentially a few books and the TV movie, to this immense era of stories with many different companions, and as always, it is very comforting hearing McGann in the role as the Doctor. He's excellent on audio. Tom Baker also has a rather prominent role within this story, and I honestly found his performance really warm and lovely. He's right in the centre of the action within this story, and I really enjoyed the moments where he referred to the other incarnations of the Doctor, but also by hopping between 8 and 4, you kind of got to see how these different Doctors would respond to certain scenarios. I think that 8 and 4 share that central role incredibly well. If anything, this story takes the term multi-Doctor story to an extreme, showcasing the degeneration problem in full force, which admittedly is perfectly fitting fan service to suit an anniversary theme. It kept me smiling throughout, and it made the episode feel like a big showdown. I think, however, it does also reaffirm some of my beliefs that I've mentioned within previous reviews of this series, that having constant incarnation hopping for all of the stories would have been too much, as exciting as it is, and having two Doctors share the story rather than just one would probably make some of the previous episodes a little bit more exciting. I think that Time Lord Immemorial also showcases this, but in a very different way given the context of Warner's Doctor. I think having two Doctors together would have just made the stories a bit different. Like in today's episode, we're going to have the First Doctor and the Sixth Doctor trying to solve the situation, and both of them keep bickering between themselves. I think it would very much be Doctor versus Doctor. I quite like that idea. I think that Matt Fitton's character matching also perfectly fits this release. Bringing together Susan and River makes sense, anchoring to both new series and the classic eras. They both also have a closeness to the Doctor personally, which allows them both to shine for different reasons. Alex Kingston embodies that fast-paced excitement of the newer incarnations, whilst Carol Ann Ford represents the original roots of the show. Having the Doctor and Susan also land briefly on an Earth in the distant past is also a lovely brief callback to An Unearthly Child. It's celebrating Doctor Who, but it's not just rehashing everything we've seen before. And that's the thing with the Union, it celebrates as anniversaries should, but it also has an identity in its own right. I think that previous episodes within this series certainly lack that identity and a more comprehensive plot due to some of the unusual pairings. Past Lives and Two's Company most notably come to mind with this. I'm going to go out on a whim and say that this story shines because of its very close ties to Big Finish itself. The concept of the whole series is unveiled, and it's something that only Big Finish can really do. Oddly, I think now having context to the series overall, I may look back on the other episodes within this series in a different light. Of course, with it the visual medium does bring restrictions, but that doesn't really exist for Big Finish, and it allows them to incorporate characters or have characters together that would never appear on screen. And although this series has sported some rather unusual pairings, I feel like this is one of the main stories within this series overall that has used that. It's used it to tell a story. It has very much brought together multiple different eras of the show, and it feels like we've really hopped around in the timeline whilst also telling a coherent story. So Matt Fitton has quite the job of giving these familiar faces moments of impact and the recognition in such a short period of time, most of which work really well. David Tennant's cameo is lovely and very heartwarming. Stephen Noonan contributes an absolute gut punch in the space of basically 2 lines in the later half of this story, and it's probably my favourite 2 lines from the episode itself. Excellently performed, a really emotional performance, and it was also admittedly quite a nice bit of fan service. It's also exciting hearing Colin, Sylvester and Peter all have these nice snappy little moments, incorporating all these incarnations together. The Union also refers to Six as Old Sixy, so extra bonus points for that. The appearance of Tim Trelaw and Michael Troughton also make this story feel very special, as it really uses the audio medium once again to deliver an anniversary story, which for obvious reasons could never appear on screen. Briefly talking about Jacob Dudman, of course within this story he is the recast 11th and 12th Doctors, and I think it's really interesting how my opinion differs when it comes to the recast new series Doctors compared to the classic ones. Part of me wonders if this is how the older fans feel about the recast classic Doctors, and I maybe feel a bit more personally attached to the new series Doctors because I've grown up with them. And I think that Jacob Dudman's 11th Doctor is absolutely brilliant. Through a very brief scene, the performance definitely made me smile. It contributed a positive moment to the story overall. I am in fact holding back listening to Dudman's 11th Doctor series with Valerie Lockwood, but I've heard very, very positive things. It has to be said though, I am less taken by his 12th Doctor performance. Maybe this is rooted in my appreciation of the 12th Doctor over the 11th Doctor. Maybe I feel a bit more protective of that incarnation in my mind. Maybe I'm a bit more picky. I didn't dislike it. It didn't make me dislike the story. He doesn't really appear for long. I just don't think it is the best. I could tell it was someone pretending to be 12, especially when you have this performance alongside basically the vast majority of currently living Doctors. I just found it a tad jarring. And not to forget, I've purposefully saved him until now, Jonathan Carley's War Doctor. Again, I don't really want to go into full details about his presence within this story, but it absolutely makes sense, and it adds lots of excitement to the final act for this episode for me. I was really sceptical when Jonathan Carley was cast as the younger Hurt Doctor, but I think that throughout a very short period of time, much like Stephen Noonan's first Doctor, they have quickly become a vocal performance that I find really, really comforting to listen to. And a special mention to Howard Carter, who did the music for this story, as soon as the War Doctor appears, we have a lovely, sort of subtle rendition of the War Doctor's theme, instantly recognisable from his series, and I really like that little tie, as it makes the Doctors feel like they have their own unique spin-offs and eras, and this story brings all of that together, which really gives me chills. As much as I did rather enjoy the Union, I do need to review this story in the context of the rest of the series as well. I think that Once in a Future is definitely not what I was expecting. I wouldn't say I was entirely satisfied by it. I found it enjoyable, but I think the accessibility considerations that this collection of stories has maybe in a way lets it down for me personally. In particular, for the new series characters, the companions and the foes, these are clearly brought into the story to bring in the wider attention of Doctor Who fans who have maybe not considered Big Finish before, and had this anniversary special been perhaps the way that I would have preferred it to be, it would have been Big Finish being incredibly self-indulgent and bringing in many different characters from across their various series, and this is Big Finish's take on Doctor Who's 60th anniversary. Which, yes, it is that anyway, but I think it could have been just done a bit differently. It would show what Big Finish has to offer. They definitely did this with the likes of David Warner's Unbound Doctor, although I wish Bernie Summerfield was present. I wish that the 6th Doctor was in the company of Flip or Constance Clark, the 7th Doctor with Hex and Ace, and despite me not listening to the series, I would have maybe even have liked to see the 11th Doctor alongside Valerie Lockwood. As frustratingly, lots of the special moments of this series for me personally are brought out by the exclusively Big Finish aspects of the plot. Colin Baker as a curator, Carly as the War Doctor, Stephen Noonan's cameos in nearly all of the stories as the First Doctor, having Liv Chenka alongside the 9th Doctor once again. But that said, as I've already mentioned, I think that Big Finish has a very important role to play in uniting classic with new. It's the audio medium, so it takes advantage of things that the TV show would struggle to do, such as Tom Baker having a central role actively within the story as the 4th Doctor, bringing back River Song, Missy, Christopher Eccleston being in an actual anniversary special, Ken Bones as the General, Harry Sullivan being in there as well. All of these appearances, plus many more, do make this series feel special, but this I believe is also let down by the actual plot not using these characters in the most effective way. The differences with the Union, I think to an extent with Time Lord Immemorial as well, is that there is a confidence with those stories, and I wish other episodes within this series had that. But then again, as this episode does also kind of address, beyond the Time War Doctor Who history does start to get confusing. The Doctor's numbering is a little bit all over the place, and it's nice to see the foe of the series and the Doctor themselves kind of acknowledging that. And it's getting to the point that with anniversary specials, I think that Doctor Who is simply too big in canon to represent every single era, to represent every single character, and before long, I think to simply make a story that is actually comprehensible, they are going to need to start focusing on certain eras of the shows and giving them stories specifically, rather than trying to fit absolutely everything in. This story definitely does a good job of that, and I think that bringing in specifically Big Finish foes, in particular the ones that are mentioned within the credits, spoiler alert, the likes of the 2, which is of course an iteration or incarnation of the Time Lord normally known as the 11, or the 9, of course, of the multiple personalities, bringing them into this series. Of course, within this episode they do briefly appear as the 2, as well as earlier within this series as well. I think that they are the perfect character for an anniversary special, and I really appreciate that this series utilises that. But overall, I think what I take from the Union most is the fact that this was an ending story that I could actually comprehend and understand, and it led to a satisfying conclusion, and I feel like it didn't run out of time. It very much looped back round to the very beginning, and it allowed to celebrate Doctor Who, which is exactly what this story is meant to be. I think it didn't bite off more than it can chew. I think this series deserves credit for doing that, because there has been multiple releases in the past that are sort of on a similar scale to this, across multiple eras of multiple Doctors, multiple various cast members, and it does simply end up being this massive technobabble fest, and you basically can't even comprehend the conclusion. So this is a story that takes that differently. It goes down a more manageable route. I think that Once and Future definitely deserves credit for that, but it may not be the best anniversary special. I think ultimately, if you want a celebration of Big Finish, if you want to see Big Finish at its best, then go to the stories that are well known within the fandom, go to the episodes that people love, and that will show the true strengths of Big Finish. But I think definitely go into Once and Future, as this is simply an enjoyable, non-taxing listen. It's not particularly too complex, it's not too grand, it's not a series that you need to binge altogether. It's simply a celebration of Doctor Who, its characters, and its many different eras. And it isn't trying to be the biggest and best thing ever. So there we go, that is it for Once and Future within 2023. Of course, in 2024, there is a bonus story. There is, of course, many rumours as to why that episode has been delayed. Well, not delayed, just placed later on down the line, some of which say it may be because of fugitive Doctors in it. Of course, Joe Martin. Who knows? I do believe it's called Coda. I'm checking now. Yes, it's Coda, the final act. So who knows what that is going to be and how it sort of applies to the rest of the series. But it is written by Tim Foley, which for those of you who listen to my reviews quite regularly, you will know that is a name that I do very much appreciate when it comes to Big Finish, so I can't wait to see what he brings. Who knows, something tells me it's going to be a very unexpected and different story. But that is it for Once and Future. I really hope you have enjoyed this review, as well as the rest of this series of reviews. Do of course stay tuned on the Host Productions for regular Doctor Who content, including of course commentary and review of the latest Big Finish audio drama releases. Have a nice day, and I shall of course see you all next time.